Empires die, but ideas, they evolve. 1453, the year the world changed forever. The walls of Constantinople had fallen, but from its ashes 3 new worlds began to rise. The torch of Byzantium, though torn from Roman hands, refused to fade. Its light would pass through Islam, through Christendom, and through time itself. When Mehmet II, the 21-year-old Sultan of the Ottomans, entered the fallen city, he did not see mere conquest. He saw destiny. To him, the fall of Constantinople was not an ending, but the fulfillment of prophecy, a divine inheritance of empire. The city that for 1,000 years had been the beating heart of Christian Rome now became the crown of Islam. But unlike many conquerors before him, Mehmet understood the power of legacy. He would not destroy Byzantium's soul, he would claim it. Within days, he rode to the great Hagia Sophia. Its golden dome was shattered, its marble cracked, yet its grandeur still whispered of the divine. Standing beneath that vast vault of light, Mehmet gave the order, "Let it live. Let it become the Hagia Sophia Chami, the Mosque of Wisdom." And thus Hagia Sophia, once the cathedral of emperors, became the Mosque of sultans, its mosaics veiled, but not erased, its memory transformed, not forgotten. Mehmet named the city Istanbul, from the Greek Istanpolin, to the city. He restored its aqueducts, repopulated its empty streets, and invited Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and Persians to make it breathe again. The Queen of Cities lived, reborn under a new empire. Mehmet called himself Kaiser-i Rum, Caesar of Rome. In that title lay the truth of what the Ottomans would become. Not destroyers of Byzantine Rome, but inheritors of its imperial dream. He revived Byzantine bureaucracy, adopted its court rituals, its hierarchy, its vision of a universal empire. The purple robes were now silk of the East, but the spirit of empire, that Roman sense of eternity, still flowed through its veins. Within the Topkapi Palace, Mehmet gathered scholars from both worlds, Muslim astronomers, Greek philosophers, Persian poets, Italian engineers. Here, in the meeting of crescent and cross, knowledge became the bridge between civilizations. From this fusion, a new power was born, the Ottoman Empire, a civilization that would rule 3 continents and endure for 6 centuries. But even as Istanbul rose from the ashes, another transformation was taking place far to the west. When Constantinople fell, hundreds of Greek scholars fled across the sea, to Venice, Florence, and Rome. Among their luggage were manuscripts, dusty forgotten scrolls of Plato, Aristotle, Euclid, and Homer. The wisdom of 1,000 years preserved by Byzantine scribes now found new soil. In the candlelit halls of Italian city-states, these exiles taught a new generation. Men like Cosimo de' Medici, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo would inherit their spark. And from that spark, the Renaissance was born. The art of Florence, the science of Galileo, the philosophy of humanism, all were descendants of that Greek flame, carried westward from a dying empire. It is said that when the last Byzantine scholars arrived in Italy, they brought with them not only books, but a way of thinking, logical, precise, yet filled with awe for the divine. The Renaissance was not merely a rebirth of classical thought. It was Byzantium reborn in Latin form. So while the Ottomans turned Hagia Sophia into a mosque, the Italians turned Greek philosophy into art. In both East and West, the soul of Byzantium endured, one in stone, the other in spirit. In the centuries that followed, Europe began to awaken. Kings forged nations, merchants built empires of coin. But behind their new confidence lay something ancient, Byzantium's memory, translated and transformed. The West had once mocked the Byzantines as decadent, yet it now wore their crown of learning and faith. The Roman Church, led by the popes of the Vatican, claimed to be the true heir of Rome's spiritual legacy. But while Europe rebuilt cathedrals and painted saints, the East was living its own story, the rise of Islam's most magnificent empire and the silent awakening of the North. Far beyond the Black Sea, in the forests of Rus, a new power stirred. The princes of Moscow, who had once sent tribute to Mongol khans, now began to see themselves as heirs to Constantinople's spirit. In 988 AD, long before Byzantium's fall, Prince Vladimir of Kiev had accepted Christianity from Byzantine missionaries. That faith, Orthodox Christianity, had taken root in the soil of the Slavs. Now, after 1453, with the Second Rome fallen, Russian monks and princes declared, "Two Romes have fallen, the third stands, and there shall be no fourth." That third Rome was Moscow. The double-headed eagle, once the symbol of Byzantium, now adorned the banners of the Russian tsars. Ivan III married Sophia Palaiolognia, the niece of the last Byzantine emperor, binding blood and faith into one destiny. In the cathedrals of the Kremlin, Byzantine chants echoed again, and the dream of the empire, Christian, eternal, divine, was reborn beneath northern skies. By the late 15th century, the Mediterranean had become a crossroads of worlds. On one shore stood the Ottoman sultans, on the other the rising powers of Spain, Portugal, and Venice. Trade routes shifted, new continents were discovered, and the center of gravity of civilization began to move westward. Yet even as ships sailed for the new world, the old world of Byzantium still shaped the faith, art, and laws of half the globe. Ottoman Istanbul became a city of scholars and merchants, where Greek architects built mosques inspired by Hagia Sophia, and Persian calligraphers adorned domes with verses of divine beauty. To the Ottomans, architecture was prayer in stone. The Suleimani Mosque, the Blue Mosque, all bore the soul of Hagia Sophia, a lineage of light stretching across centuries. Thus the empire that fell in fire found new life in every flame it lit. From Istanbul's domes to Florence's frescoes, from Moscow's golden crosses to the laws of Europe itself, Byzantium lived on.
An empire may fall in a moment, but its echo can last 1,000 years. 1453 was not the end, it was the transformation. From the ruins of Constantinople, new worlds were taking shape, each carrying a fragment of Byzantium's immortal soul. In the decades following Mehmed II's triumph, the Ottoman Empire flourished. Its sultans ruled not as mere conquerors, but as guardians of civilization. They called themselves Padishah of Islam and Caesar of Rome. And indeed they were both. Within the walls of Istanbul, scholars translated Greek manuscripts into Arabic and Persian. Byzantine engineers served Ottoman architects. Even the city's layout, with its 7 hills crowned by domes, remained a living echo of the new Rome that once was. Under Mehmed's successors, Bayezid, Selim, and Suleiman, the empire stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, from the deserts of Arabia to the gates of Vienna. But this new Rome was different. It was not ruled by the cross, but by the crescent, not by Latin law, but by the code of Islam. Yet in its architecture, its ceremony, its sense of universal order, the spirit of Byzantium endured. Suleiman the Magnificent, known to his people as Kanuni, the lawgiver, was more than a conqueror. He was a ruler in the Byzantine mold. Under him, the empire reached the height of its glory. His court blended the cultures of 3 continents. Greek physicians, Arab astronomers, Persian poets, and Jewish financiers all served the sublime port. In the domes of his mosques, the sound of the muezzin rose like an ancient hymn, as if the city itself had learned to speak the languages of both faiths. The architect, Sinan, student of Byzantine design, built mosques that seemed to float upon light, each one a dialogue between Islam and Byzantium. In his masterpiece, the Süleymaniye Mosque, you can still see the spirit of Hagia Sophia, its balance, its serenity, its defiance of gravity. Suleiman's empire stood as Byzantium's reflection, a mirror image of its former self, Roman in order, Greek in intellect, Eastern in soul. While Istanbul ruled the East, a new power rose in the West. The Renaissance had blossomed into the age of exploration. Ships from Spain and Portugal sailed beyond the known world, seeking not Constantinople but Cathay, not relics but riches. But even in their discoveries, Byzantium's legacy lingered. The maps they carried, the stars they charted, the geometry they used to navigate, all descended from Greek and Byzantine science. In Florence and Venice, artists painted domes that mirrored Hagia Sophia. In Rome, popes rebuilt St. Peter's Basilica in the image of Byzantine majesty. The symmetry of Greek domes, the use of light as divine metaphor, these were the gifts of a fallen empire reborn in marble and paint. But with knowledge came pride, and pride bred division. The great schism between East and West, once theological, had now become civilizational. Rome claimed universality through the Pope. Constantinople, and later Moscow, claimed it through orthodoxy. The two Romes now faced each other as rivals, each declaring itself the sole guardian of the true faith. Between them lay centuries of misunderstanding and the memory of the Crusaders' sack of Constantinople in 1204, a wound that never healed. To the Orthodox East, the Latin West had betrayed Christendom itself. To the West, the East had clung too long to the past. And so, while half of Europe sailed toward modernity, the other half stood guard over eternity. Far in the frozen north, the idea of empire took root again, not in marble, but in ice and iron. In 1547, Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible, was crowned as Tsar of all the Russias. The title Tsar itself came from Caesar, the ancient name reborn in Slavic tongue. Moscow now claimed what no other city dared, the mantle of the Roman Empire through blood, through faith, through prophecy. Orthodox monks wrote, "Two Romes have fallen, the third stands, there shall be no fourth." The Kremlin's golden domes gleamed like those of Constantinople, and Byzantine iconography adorned every cathedral. From the mosaics to the hymns, from the liturgy to the law, Byzantium lived again, in Russian form. This spiritual inheritance would shape Russia's destiny for centuries. Its messianic vision, its belief in divine mission, its conflict with the West, all born from Byzantine soil. As the 16th century dawned, the Mediterranean became the arena of two worlds, Ottoman and Christian, crescent and cross. The Battle of Lepanto, 1571, was their reckoning, a naval storm of faith and fury. Christian fleets under the banner of the Holy League met the Ottomans on the open sea. The clash was apocalyptic. Cannon smoke, shattered oars, and the cries of men praying their last prayers. The Holy League won that day, but no victory could erase the truth. The world was now a world of empires, each inheriting fragments of Byzantium's dream of universal dominion. For centuries, the Ottomans would hold the East, the Habsburgs and Papacy the West, and Russia the North. And through it all, the invisible thread of Byzantium connected them all. Law, liturgy, architecture, philosophy, the silent DNA of civilization. By the 17th century, the name Byzantium itself had become a memory, a term coined by Western historians to describe an empire they never understood. To its own people, it had always been Romania, the empire of the Romans. But its ghost lingered. Every time a church raised a dome toward the heavens, every time a law invoked divine order, every time a ruler claimed to be ordained by God, Byzantium spoke again. In Paris, scholars rediscovered Greek philosophy. In London, lawgivers built systems that echoed Justinian's code. In St. Petersburg, Peter the Great would later proclaim a new Constantinople. Even as the Ottomans ruled from the Bosporus, the world they built was carved from Byzantine stone. When the last Byzantine scholar closed his book in exile, he could not have known that his words would awaken the modern world. The humanism of the Renaissance, the geometry of science, the mysticism of the Orthodox faith, all of them carried the fingerprints of his empire. Byzantium had been many things: Roman in heritage, Greek in language, Christian in soul. And though its walls had fallen, its light had found new vessels. In the West, that light became the fire of reason. In the East, it became the glow of faith. And in the middle, where East met West, it burned as the eternal struggle between the two. For the flame that once lit the domes of Constantinople now burns in every heart that seeks truth, through knowledge, through beauty, through faith. Today Istanbul still stands, its skyline a symphony of domes and minarets. Hagia Sophia endures, neither holy church nor mosque, but a monument to the human longing for the divine. In its shadows, one can still feel the heartbeat of Byzantium, the empire that refused to die. From its fall rose three civilizations: the Ottoman world of faith and empire, the Western world of art and science, the Slavic world of mysticism and destiny. Three heirs, three mirrors, one soul. The story of Byzantium was never about marble or power. It was about endurance, the will to preserve meaning against the tide of time. And so when we speak of Rome, we speak of all who carried its fire, from Constantine to Mehmed, from Justinian to Suleiman, from the scholars of Athens to the dreamers of Florence. For empires are mortal, ideas are eternal. Thus ended the story of Byzantium, and thus began the story of us all. If this story moved you, consider lighting a spark of your own. Hit the like button and share the legacy of Byzantium with others. Tell us in the comments which part of this empire's journey inspired you most. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss the next great chronicle of valor. Because history is never just the past, it's the flame we carry forward.